for letting me know. So yeah, today we'll try to cover the concepts of the databases first. I will try to understand what are mutual exclusive logs. Then we'll try to see what were the older strategies to actually perform the locking and perform the updates on the databases, and what is optimistic locking. We'll try to understand indexes as well. Once we're done with these database concepts, then we'll move on to the caching side. So we'll talk about different caching mechanism, different caching algorithm to cache the data. We'll also talk about different eviction strategies. How do you remove the data from the cache? And then we'll try to work on some of the algorithms and how this data is stored in the cache. And then we'll actually talk about one of the actual cache, which is already implemented. For example, Memcache, or you have RabbitMQ. So these are all cache. We'll talk about this as well. We'll go into the details of this, and we'll try to see how these cache are designed, and we'll talk about the consistent hashing, modified consistent hashing algorithms to distribute to create a cache in a distributed system environment. Okay. And as I told you, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a message over the chat, and I'll try to take your questions after we are done with one of the concepts. Okay. Now let's try to understand uh, the caching as a concept. So now what we'll do is first, what exactly is that? First, we'll start with the database. But before I do that, let me quickly introduce myself. So some of you might have already attended my previous sessions. I am Prakhar Agrawal and currently working as SD3 at Google. And I'm here to, I'm here from the Learn Bay, and we'll try to cover some of the concepts of cache today. Okay. So before I move on to the concepts of cache, let's talk about the databases and cache. Correct. So what exactly we understand from cache? So there are two concepts of cache. Cache can be used in the logical terms, and it can be used in the physical terms. Usually when we talk about cache, we understand it by physical terms. Basically, there is L1 cache, L2 cache. You might have heard all this, right? So let me try to explain you what cache means in the logical terms as well. See, we have hard disk, and we have a distributed cache, correct? And then we can have a memory, which is also known as RAM, and we'll have L1, L2 cache, and then we can have registers. And as all of us know that whenever we actually go from here to here, correct, the time to access the data increases and the cost decreases. Basically, let's say if you're creating a cache like this, correct? So basically from here to here, this time to fetch the data increases, and basically your cost decreases from here to here. Your cost increases in this direction. Let's say if you're trying to buy a hard disk of 10 GB, and if you're trying to buy a registers or L1, L2 cache of 10 GB, this will cost you way more than what hard disk will cost you. But the time will be way more faster to read the data from L1, L2 cache compared to your hard disk. Okay. Now I'll switch onto another document, and let's try to draw some diagrams there. Just a second. Just give me a second. I want to. I'll start sharing another tab. Is my document visible to all of you? The whiteboard? Okay. I'm assuming it is visible. The whiteboard is visible. So let's try to understand cache as a concept. So let's say you are actually designing an application. Let's say you're designing a Twitter. Okay, you are designing a Twitter, or let's say you're designing some YouTube. What you say is, I'll store all the data of my users in my US servers. Okay. So you're storing all the data for all the users. Global data is present in the US servers because you have a big data center here. In Singapore as well, you have another data center, which is comparatively smaller to the US server. Okay. And I'm saying that I'll store all the data of users belonging to Asia in Singapore servers. And let's say we have a smaller data center in India as well. And what I'm saying is I'll try to store all the data of all the users from India in India server. Now let's say if you are receiving a request from a user sitting in India to access their data. You're receiving a request from a user sitting in India to access the data. So basically what will happen is the call will go to India server. Now, it could be possible that because the size of the data center is smaller, we might not be able to store all the data of all the users in India server. So if this data is present in India server, then we'll return the response. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll actually go to Singapore server to read the data. Now, it could be possible that this data is also not present in the Singapore server. Then in that case, we'll go and read the data from the US servers. So basically, when the data is read from India server, right, then in that case, this can be a hard disk. But this is still behaving as a cache for Singapore servers. Similarly, when your data is present in Singapore servers and you don't need to go to US servers to read the data, then in that case, we can say that this data will be, this is behaving as a cache for US servers. Okay, so this is the logical meaning of cache. So when we say that we have to cache some data, it can be cached in different format. You can cache the data in the hard disk as well. Okay, I hope this much is clear to everyone. Now you can't cache everything, right? Because the concept of cache is basically you are replicating the data and keeping it closer to the user so that user can, so the return time of the response is faster. The latency to fetch the data is lesser, correct? Now it could be possible you don't want to actually copy the whole data in the cache, right? You might want to actually figure out what is more important data for me, and accordingly I have to create my cache. There is something called 80-20 rule. Let's try to understand this 80-20 rule in detail. So what does this rule says is that you always cache. So this rule says that 80% of the time, 80% of the data is read 20% of the time, and 20% of the data is read 80% of the time. Correct? If the 80% of the data is read 20% of the time, 20% of the data is read 80% of the time, so we'll always try to cache the data which is read 80% of the time. And what is this 80% of, what is that data? This is 20% of the overall data. Correct. Now see, we are saying that we can't cache everything, right? We can't cache everything. We can't cache all the data. So we need to figure out that 20% of the overall data which has to be cached in our system. Now, before I jump and drill down into the concept of cache, I want to talk about some of the concepts of the databases as well. Okay, so let's see some of the concepts of the databases as well before we move on to these details. So all of you are aware of, all of you know that there are tables in the databases, and each of these tables will contain some fields in our databases. The database will contain some tables, and each of this table will contain some fields in our databases. This can be your field 1, 2. For example, let's say if you have an employee table, correct? You can have an employee ID, employee name, the company to which they belong to, correct? Their age, phone number, address, and bunch of other details. Correct? This can be my employee table. Now, let's say there are two. I'm going into the multi-threading application, and there are, let's say, two threads. So let's say your company was Google earlier, and the name of this company has changed to Alphabet now. So you want to update this particular column, correct, in your table. Now it could be possible that for some reason you're receiving the call to update the same column from two different threads at the same time. Now the databases are designed, these are SQL databases which are designed in such a way that they satisfy four properties. The first one is atomicity. The second one is consistency. The third one is known as isolation. And the fourth one is known as durability. So you have atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. So these are the four properties. Let's try to understand the meaning of each of this in details. So whenever we say that your system should be, your database should be atomic in nature, your transaction should be atomic in nature, means that, let's say if you have three different tables, table 1, table 2, table 3. Okay. And we want to update the details from one transaction in all three tables. I'll give you an example. So let's say you're designing an e-commerce system and your payment was successful. Then you have to update the order status of the order. You have to update the payment status of the payment. And you have to also update the number of transactions or transaction status of that particular transaction. So basically you have to update all these three details in three different tables. Now you want to perform this operation in one single transaction. So you'll call table 1, you'll call table 2, and you'll call table 3. All these three operations will be done as a part of a single transaction. And if one of the operation fails, then automatically these two operations are rolled back. What it means is that your system is atomic in nature, which means that either all or none of the operations will be performed. The second one is known as consistency. Now let's try to understand consistency as well. So let's say if you have transaction 1 and you have a transaction 2. You have two transactions. One is transaction 1 and transaction 2. And what it does is, so there is, let's say some account X, and there is some account Y and account Z. Correct? So what you're doing is, let's say you're reading the data X here. Then you're doing x equal to x plus 10, and you're doing y equal to y minus 10. And basically here you're doing that right x, right y, correct? And here you're not doing, so till this time you're not doing anything, and here you're doing read x, and then you're doing something x equal to x minus 100, z equal to z plus 100, and write x, and then you're doing commit x, commit y, and here you're doing as well commit x, sorry, commit x and commit z, and here also you're doing commit x and commit y. Correct. So I'll explain consistency. Let's this is more related to isolation. Let me explain you the consistency first. So basically what consistency means is that here you have account X, account Y, account Z. And let's say initially you had 100 rupees here, 50 rupees here, and 180 rupees here. And let's say you are transacting 10 rupees from here to here. So eventually this will become 110, this will become 40. And then you are performing, you are removing 100 rupees from here, and then you are performing, adding that, transferring it to Z. So this will become 180. So basically, before performing all the transactions and after performing all the transactions, the total amount in your bank should still remain same. So if you'll see 80 plus 50 is 130 plus 100 is 230. Here is 180 plus 40 is 220 plus 10 is 230. So basically before, so your database should be in consistent state after performing or after completing the transaction. So basically the previous state and the current state should be consistent for your database. I hope this much is clear to everyone. Now we'll try to understand isolation. So what isolation says is that all these transactions should be performed independently. What I meant by performed independently is that, let's try to. So this is transaction one. This is transaction two. So transaction one should not interrupt transaction two. So you're reading the data x here. So you'll read 100. You'll do x equal to x plus 10, which will become 110. Y equal to y minus 10. So y will become, you will read y first. Sorry. So read y, which will be 50. Y equal to y minus 10, which will become 40. Write x will become 110. Write y will become 40. Now, if you read x here, because this is an independent transaction and this data was read here, so you have to read x here 100. You will not read it as 110 because this is not committed yet. Read is 100, 100 equal to 100. So this will become 0. Z equal to z plus, so we'll have read z as well. If we read z, then z will become 180, sorry, 80. Z will become 180. Now we have write x will become what? 0, and the commit x will become, no, not commit x, and we'll have write y, write z as well here, which will be what? 180. Now, if you try to commit this x, let's say this x is getting committed, correct? This x is getting committed, so x will become 110 and y will become 40. Now, if you try to commit this x, there was a stale, if you'll see, there was a stale read here, right? There was a stale read. Why stale read? Because x actually became 110 here. but it was not yet committed, and you are trying to read the data, which is because the transactions are independent, right? These are independent because this is not yet completed, this is not committed. These two transactions are independent, so they'll behave, basically they'll be performed in the isolation. But if you actually commit this transaction here, commit X will work, then in that case you'll end up committing the wrong value, which is 0, because this was committed before, and here you will commit wrong value is 180. Now what will happen? If you'll add this 180 plus 0 plus 40, that will be 220. Ideally it should have been 10, but because there was a wrong read or stale read, I would say, this will cause a problem. So all the transactions are should be performed in isolation. This is a database property. But if we try to perform all the transactions in isolation without keeping some, you know, information, or basically without not performing this synchronously. See, if this would have been performed after this, then that wouldn't have been a problem. But because this was started before even this was committed, that caused a problem. It will give you the inconsistent state. So to handle these kind of situation, we actually talk about the locking mechanism. So because the transactions are performed in isolation, it might lead to problems. So what we'll have, we'll learn the locking mechanism to make sure that these transactions are consistent in nature, even though they're performed in isolation. Now, how we'll do that is something which we'll read in a minute or so, after 4 minutes or so, 3-4 minutes or so. Okay. Now this is the isolation part. So what we are saying is all the transactions are performed independently in our system. Okay. The fourth and the most important part is the durability. What it says is that all the states of the database transaction, all the states of the databases should be stored. Basically, you should be rolled back to the previous version whenever required, right? So all this database stores are stored. All this committed state of the database should be stored, so that you can always go and roll back to the previous state. You can always go back to the previous state of your system. Okay. Now we talked about locking mechanism, correct? So this is my transaction T1, this is my transaction T2. There is a stale read and we don't want to perform this stale read. We want to stop this state. There are two types of locks which we generally deal. One is known as shared lock. Another one is known as exclusive locks or mutex lock. Now from the terminologies itself, it is clear that shared lock is a lock which can be shared across multiple threads. Exclusive lock is a lock which can't be shared across multiple threads. Now let's try to understand this in a better way. So let's say if you have a transaction T1, we have another transaction T2, and we have another transaction T3. And transaction T1 is also performing a read operation. This transaction T2 is also performing a read operation, read Y, and then it is doing read X somewhere here. And this is also doing some read, and finally it is doing some read here. Now, all these transactions are not performing any write right now. So let's say X was equal to 100 initially. So do you see any problem if this T1 also reads 100, also reads 100, T2 also reads 100, and T3 also reads 100? This should be fine. So because the value is not getting updated, right? So all three transactions can read the same value at the same time, correct? So whenever we have to perform the read operations over the row in the database, we take a shared log. I hope this much is clear to everyone. So you take the shared log. Now basically, let's say T2 is over. Here T2 was completed, there was no write required. And T3 was also completed here, there was no write required. And now what we want to do is we want to write, we want to update some x. So x will become x plus 100 somewhere. Let's say x became x plus 100 here somewhere. And now if you want to write this x, so if you want to write this x, first we need to upgrade this log from a shared log to exclusive log. Now we have to check if there is any other read log, shared log already present. See if this read is done and this read is done, and then you are trying to perform the write operation. This is not the stale read anymore, right? Because this transaction is completed. This transaction is also completed. So if you try to write now, if you upgrade your this read log, your write log, then and if there is no other transaction which is holding a write log or exclusive or sorry read log, then in that case you can upgrade this to a write log. You upgrade this to a write log, you then do commit x. So now the x equal to x plus 100, so x will become what? 200. And there is no stale read here because there is no commit, there is no write happening here. Okay. Now let's say if this is not the case, let's say if you have T1 transaction and if we have T2 transaction. And in the T1 transaction, you have the read log. And again, you have somewhere here read log again. And here you have a write log. Correct. And here also you have a write log. Basically, if you want to do x equal to x plus 10, and here also you want to do x equal to x minus 100, then this also need a right, and you want to perform right, so it also needs a write log. This one also needs a write log. Now see, first this read log will be taken. So we can say that on x, T1 will take a read log. On y, T2 will also take a read log. Correct. Now T1 wants to perform the write log, right? So T1 has to upgrade their read to write, and they can upgrade it to write only when T2 releases the log, the read log, correct? Because there can be only one write log at a time. They can't be one write can't be there with one read, correct? That's not possible. Otherwise, you'll run into the same issues. So this one can't be taken, this can't be upgraded to write because this is also waiting to take this because this is still working. Now it will come here and it will try to upgrade its log as well to write log. And it can't upgrade its logs to write log because T1 is holding the read log. T1 also needs a write log, T2 also write log. And this situation is known as a deadlock situation. I'll stop here. Let me try to take some questions. I think we'll be covering L1, L2 cache in future, right? We'll be covering L1, L2 cache is a very basic concept. You can read about it. There is nothing, it's not a concept. It's just some terminologies. It helps you to store some of the details. You can read about it. If you want, I can cover it in the next session. We'll have another follow-up session on the next Sunday. If you want, I can cover it in like 2 or 3 minutes about I can cover that in the next session. Is the locking mechanism chosen by the developer? No, it's not. It is never chosen by the developer. We'll talk about some of the eviction strategies of the cache that can be chosen by a developer, but locking mechanism is not chosen by a developer. These mechanism is directly present in your databases, and you don't have a choice for this. These are already present, but we are trying to understand this because we'll have to when we'll try to write the data in the database, in the cache and the database at the same time, then we'll have to understand this concept. So I'm covering this concept first, and then we'll move on to the cache. Basically, how do you perform the LRU cache, LFU cache, evictions, what is write through, route back, write around cache, how to upgrade the data, how this is maintained in the cache. We talk about all those things, correct? But before we go there, I want you to understand this very well. I'd request everyone to quickly see if this looks good to you or not. So let's start with this. Basically, I explained you what exactly is the cache as a concept. Then I told you Then I told you what are the database concepts. So what are the tables, what are the employees. Then I've talked about the SQL properties of the SQL databases, ACID properties. These are known as ACID properties. What are those ACID properties? Correct. And then we talked about like I want all of you to go through this. Yeah, I mean, someone is asking, but this deadlock scenario is very common in real scenarios, multi-thread, multiple might update the same value differently in databases. What about the database internal lock versus locking the column row programmatically? We'll talk about this in a while. Give me some time. We'll go on to each of these things. Give me some time. Bear with me for some time. I don't want to rush. If you have any questions related to whatever we have read so far, please ask those questions. Otherwise, I'll cover this. Now there are T1 and now we talked about the T1 and T2 transaction and we tried, so because we have isolations, right? All the transactions are performed independently, but if that is the only condition, then we might end up writing the wrong data into our system. Here you can see the stale reads. I want you to go through, all of you to go through T1 and T2. If you have any questions, then please ask. Give you a minute for this. So someone is asking, how do we decide which 20% of the data has to be cached? Yes, we'll talk about this as well when we'll come on to when we'll try to understand what are different caching algorithms and what are the different eviction algorithms. We'll talk about that as well. Okay. I mean, we'll have to wait for some time because I mean, this whole session is divided into two different sessions, right? We'll have one session today and we'll have one session on the follow-up session on the Sunday. We'll have to cover a bunch of details. So yeah, I'll cover that question as well. Yeah. Okay. Now we talked about the shared lock and exclusive lock to handle this situation. And we saw an example of a shared lock and how it works. And then we saw an example of a shared lock with exclusive lock and how it is causing a deadlock. Now, this is very correct, right? Now, it could be possible that multiple threads are trying to update the same row. See, the lock is always taken. Let's start. So earlier, in early days, the lock used to be taken only on the row, the complete row. We used to lock the complete row earlier, correct, to actually update the details. And yes, you're correct. A same row can be updated at the same time from multiple threads. How do you handle this situation? So this is a deadlock situation because we want to update and we can't upgrade both the threads can't take the exclusive lock at the same time. So there is something called, there are few concepts to break the deadlocks. We'll talk about how to handle deadlocks. So basically one concept is known as, one simple way to do it is basically roll back one of the transactions. So basically what happens in this is, this is also known as aging. So basically if T1 started before T2, then in that case, we'll ask T2 to roll back. And T1 will get the priority and T1 will complete its tasks its task, and T2 has to start from the beginning again, so that we don't need to. So there was a deadlock and we have to break the deadlock. So T1 will actually take the, T2 will be rolled back. T1 will ask T2 to roll back, or system will ask T2 to roll back because T2 was started later on. T1 will come, and then T2 will lose their read lock, and T1 will complete their uh, transaction. And then once the T1 is done, then T2 is basically, then T2 can restart its connection. So that's how you generally do it. Now, the problem, you can clearly see a problem, right? There can be a T2 will have to restart, might have to restart multiple times. Correct. So there was something called aging. I'm not going into the details of that because no one will ask you those questions. But aging is basically the transaction which was started earlier will get a preference to always get a, always get the lock first, and all the other transactions will be rolled back. But if you try to lock a complete row, then in that case, I mean, if let's say T1 is trying to update some field 1 and T2 is trying to update some field 2, and these are independent field, there is no T1 and T2 is not trying to update the same field. Then in that case, we came up with the concept of taking a lock on the base of row, comma, column. Correct? This was better than the previous one because if T1 is trying to update the field 1, T2 is trying to update the field 2. Basically, they are not trying to update the same common field. Then they can actually, you take the lock on the base of row and column, the row number and column. And if the same columns are, for the same row, if the same columns are not locked, you can take the exclusive lock on the other. Correct. Now, so basically, this is internal locking, and this database again maintains the row and column. Now, seen that sometimes we actually create the locks on our own. So we say that we'll lock this way. That's an exclusive. That's, you can do it a programmatically logs. That can be done, but it's not preferred. Generally, you should leave that to your system to figure out how the lock should be taken. But in sometimes in cache you have to do it, and we'll talk about that as well. Sometime today or in the next session. Okay. The another question is, but rolling back the transaction, won't this be against the isolation property? No, it is not against the isolation property. T1 is still, see, T2 is not dependent on T1. It's just that it's a system call that T2 should be rolled back because T1 wants to write the data. Here, if T1 and T2 are performing some operations and T1, they're updating the different data, then T1 is still perform independently with T2, right? They're not interrupting with each other. Or for example, T1, T2, and T3 all are reading the data, then also it's not a problem. See, if you end up, isolation doesn't mean that you end up writing the wrong data into your system. Isolation just means that T1 should not be dependent on T2, T2 should not be dependent on T1. And the database should be in the consistent state. But if we just do that, if we say that only T1 should not be dependent on T1, T2 should not be dependent on T1, T1 should not be dependent on T2, then in that case, we'll break the property of consistency. So we'll have to be careful, and we say that these transactions are still independent, but system will take a call which transaction the preference should be given to. Okay, I hope this is clear to everyone. Correct. Now there is new concept of optimistic locking. This is very important. Most of the databases are shifting to this, and you will not find this optimistic locking easily on the internet. This is a very new concept. This came like few years back. What is optimistic locking? So you say that I won't take any locks. I won't take any locks at all. And what we say is, whenever, so let's say if you're reading the data, you just read the data, keep reading the data, keep reading the data, keep reading the data. No problem with that. You don't take any lock. Why you don't take any lock? Because let's say there is a read X and there's a read X. You have to maintain all this, right? Like this lock is taken, this lock is taken, this lock is taken, this lock is taken. What we are saying is, we assume that we have logged this data. Correct. Now, what is the issue with the previous approach? See, if we are reading this data and this was the read performed here, and we just have to perform right here, right? Now you can't perform the write unless this read is completed. Although this transaction was only reading the data, this can't take the write lock on only reading the data. This can't take the write lock unless this read lock is left by transaction T2. Correct? Understood this one? This was the problem with the previous. What optimistic locking says is that I'm optimistically believing that I have taken a lock. I'm optimistically believing that I have taken a lock. So when I'm reading the data here, X, I'll read the data. I won't take any lock on this. So let's say if I read 100, here also I read 100. And when I'm writing the data here, write X I'm performing, I'll check before doing the commit, I'll check if the current state of this X is still 100 or not. If I'm doing X equal to X plus 100, but the previous or the current state here, I know that I shifted this from 100 to 200. And if the value which is in the database still is 100, that means that this state is not yet changed. No one has written that data. So I'll say that I'll perform my write operation. Now, if I'll perform my write operation, then the write data will be written as 200. And by any chance, if there was any write here at this point as well, the state to which it was trying to update, let's say we had X equal to X plus 10 as well here. It was trying to update from 100 to 10. When it is trying to write the data, this became 200. Sorry, it was trying to update from 100 to 110 and trying to write the data of X to X, 110 to X. This already became 200. So we'll say that we'll fail this transaction or roll back this transaction. The advantage which you get with the optimistic locking is that you are saying that I'm optimistically locking this, although I'm not taking any lock. Why I'm not taking lock? Because if this has to be performed, I don't need to wait for this transaction to get completed. I can still go ahead because this can be just a read transaction. And if at all this was a read plus write transaction, read modify write transaction, there was a write here as well, then in that case, this will be automatically rolled back because the the X value of X will be changed, and we'll check here if the X has been changed from what we have read or not. If it is changed, then we'll roll back this transaction. So this is known as optimistic. Okay. So basically you don't take any locks. When you perform the write, you actually basically perform that atomically. That operation is atomic in nature. And before you perform the write onto the database, you pass the previous state, you pass the current state, and basically if the previous state of the database has changed from the previous state which you have passed in the write operation, then the transaction will be rolled back. If the states are same, then it will update the values to the current state. That is known as optimistic locking. So did you understand what is the advantage of optimistic locking over the row column lock? See here, even if you have a row column lock, see, this is saving you, correct? But let's say if you have field 3 timestamp present in both the ones, then again you can't perform T1 and T2 together, right? You can't perform in T1 and T2 together. So automatically what happens is that in that case, this might be just reading the data. In that case, optimistic locking is way better than your row column lock is. How do we implement optimistic locking via coding? You don't need to. This is automatically provided out of the box by the database. You need to understand the concept of optimistic locking because some of the database might have shifted themselves to optimistic locking. You don't need to implement this by coding anyway. This all is already present in your data. I mean, this is already provided out of the box by your databases. Okay. Jigar, what do you want me to repeat? Can you type that? Which section do you want me to repeat?
Regarding that, the second part, like so what we are saying here is like, suppose I have T1 and T2, two trays are there. So the T1 is doing the write operation, but T2 is doing the read operation. Then in that case, T2 won't be locked, right? It will be able to.
Okay, let me explain. I understood. What is your question?
Okay.
Let me try to explain. You can go on. So basically, what I'm saying is here we were saying that we'll take a lock first. This will take a shared lock. This will also take a shared lock, and this can't be updated to your exclusive lock unless this transaction is completed. correct? See, let's say now here T1 is performing a read, T2 is also performing a read. So we will have to take in the previous, if you take the row column log, then this will take a lock T1, sorry, shared R lock, read lock. This will also take a read lock on X. So X has two locks. R1 has a lock, R2 also has a lock. Sorry, T1 has a lock and T2 also has a lock. Both are read locks. Correct. Now, basically, when this T1 is trying to write the data, then it will have to wait for T2 to get completed, right? So there is, you can see that there is a wait time here unnecessarily because only T2 is performing read only. So to avoid that this wait time, what we came up with is optimistic locking. We say that don't take any locks. What we do is we store the state of the X. We know the current, the, the value which was present in X when we read the data. The X was 100. Now we do X equal to X plus 10. So it will become 110. The previous was 100. When we're trying to update write X, because you have not taken log, we see what first we'll do again, we'll check what is the current value of X. This is 100. What did we read as X? We read 100 only. So we can easily perform write because no one has changed that data yet. So we can update that to 100. In this case, if let's say there was a write later on, correct? The value will be updated to 110 or 200, whatever operation we are performing. And here, when we read this data, this was 100. When we're trying to perform the write, this already became 110. So you can't write this data because this already became 110. And in a way, you have read the stale data, correct? So that's why you will perform the rollback on this particular. I
Okay.
hope this is clear to everyone.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the concept of optimistic locking. I'll wait here for a couple of minutes. I want all of you to go through it. Just think about it in your mind. If this is clear, good, we'll move on to the next set of things. Okay. So now let's move on to the, if there are no further questions, let's move on to the next set of things. So we talked about the database concepts. Now let me quickly talk about the indexes as well on a very high level because that might be also useful for you people. And then we'll go to the caching. Okay. What are indexes? So see, why indexes are useful. So this is basically for the fast retrieval of data. Correct? We want to fetch the data very quickly from our tables. Let's take an example. Let's say you have an employee table. In this employee table, you have three things. You have name, you have their age, you have their phone number, and let's say we have employee ID as well. And let's say we have their city as well. So now let's say some employees 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some name are there. They have some age like 23, 24, 22, 23, 24. They have some phone numbers. They have some city like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai. Correct? Now, this is my primary key. So what database does is it automatically creates a primary index on your primary key. So what it means is that the data will be sorted on the basis of the employee ID in your table. Now there is something called a secondary index. So let's say if you want to get all the employees working in Bangalore, then in that case, you'll have to do a full table scan. Correct? Because this data is not sorted. So what we do is we create an index on city. And we'll have Bangalore, Delhi. So this data will be sorted, Hyderabad and Mumbai. And Bangalore will be pointing to this and this. There will be 2 pointers pointing to this and this. Delhi will be pointing to this. Hyderabad will be pointing to this. Mumbai will be pointing to this. Correct. Now let's say we have another city called another employee with some name originally belonging to some city called Kolkata. So we'll have to insert, we'll have to sort this data and put this index here as well. So here Kolkata will come and this will be pointing to this. So see, now if you have to get all the employees of Bangalore, you just need to go to this because they're sorted. You go to this and you have the 2 pointers from here and here. You go and read the data for this row and this row. So data is retrieved faster. But let's say if you create so many indexes on each of this, the problem is that the writes become slow. Why? Because if you're inserting anything here, then you have to update your secondary indexes as well. So this is good for the fast retrieval of data. Basically, if it's a read heavy system, then you should create the indexes based on the requirements. Correct? Create indexes. If it's not a read heavy system, then don't create the indexes. If it's not a read heavy, it's a write heavy system, don't create indexes. Write heavy system, writes will become slow if you have writes are slow if you add more indexes. I hope this is clear to everyone. We understood the concept of indexes as well. Now let's talk about the cache. We'll talk about the cache. Just give me 1 second, like 30 seconds. I'm getting a call. I have to take this call. Just give me 30 seconds. Okay. Yeah. So now let's talk about the cache. Okay, let's try to understand cache. Why indexes? So someone is asking why indexes are slow and write heavy. Is it like array when we have indexes, so read is quick, but the write is slow? Not, yeah, I mean, you can assume that. So basically, okay, let's try to relate it to the array. So if you have the indexes in the array, right, you can easily go to that index and read the data. But if you have to insert something in one of the, you have to shift the array, you have to insert something in middle, you have to shift one indexes. Correct? So that will take something. Although you can't relate, this is not an apple to apple comparison, you can't directly relate with array, But what I'm trying to say is when you're updating something in this table, employee table, you have to update your index as well. Now, let's say if you have created 10 indexes in your table, it's not just for the write heavy system. Whenever you have introduced more indexes, your writes will become slow, your reads will become faster. That is for sure. But in write heavy system, you should try to avoid creating a lot of indexes because your writes are becoming slow. Why writes are becoming slow? Because whenever, let's say if you're trying, you have one table and you have 10 indexes, if you're creating one row in that table, you have to update that table as well as you have to update all those 10 indexes as well. Correct? So that's why the write becomes slow. Okay. So you should avoid creating so like indexes unless required in your write heavy system. Also in the read heavy systems as well, right? Unless you have a strong requirement to create an index, if you have to read the data based on a particular field or multiple fields, then in that case only you create the indexes on the table, secondary indexes on the table. I hope it is clear to you now. Now see, there are different ways to actually cache the data. We'll try to understand 3 different ways to cache the data. And this is important from the perspective where we'll have to read and write the data into the database and into the cache at the same time. So see, there are different ways to cache the data. The first one is known as write around cache. The second one is known as, the first one is known as write around cache. The second one is known as write back cache. And the third one is known as write through cache. Now, what is write around cache? So basically what you do in this cache is that you have a, let's try to draw a diagram. So let's say you have a database here and you have a cache here. What you do is whenever you're performing the write, you'll perform the write into the database tab. You'll write the data into the data. Whenever you're performing the read, you'll first go and check if the data is present in the cache or not. If not present, then in that case, what will you do? You'll go and read the data from the database. Once you read the data from the database, you actually update the cache. With this data and you return the answer. And for the next time when you read the data again, then that case the data will be present in the cache. You directly go and read the data from this cache and return back the response. Okay. What is write back cache? So write back cache is write the data into the cache during the write call and the response is returned as success. So basically you have a write cache here, you have a DB here. You write the data directly into the cache, correct? And on an async basis. Async basically means it's not in the live flow. You write the data into the database as well, correct? And whenever the read is performed directly from the cache. If the data is not present in the cache, then you go and read the data from the database and return the answer. Correct? This is known as write back cache. We'll talk about the pros and cons of each of these approaches. Write through cache is the cache in which you write the database data into the cache and into the DB in the same call. You write the data into the cache as well as into the DB in the same call. And once the data is returned successfully in the cache as well as in the DB, then you return success. Otherwise, you return. And whenever there is a read, you read the data. So this is my write. When you read the data, you read it from the cache. If it is present in the cache, you return. If it is not, you go and read the data from the data. Now you might ask me a question, why the data is not present in the cache if you're writing in both the cache as well as in DB? because the size of the cache is always lesser than the size of the DB. So the data which you have written in the database will always be persisted forever. The data in the cache might not be persisted forever because we might have to remove the data if the new data is coming. So we might remove the older data. So when we are performing the read, it could be possible that we are trying to read the data which is not present anymore in the cache. And that's why you have to go and read it from the data. Now talking about the pros and cons of each of this algorithm or each of these ways to write the data, let's start with the write around cache. So what do you think? What are the pros? What are the cons of this approach? Any one of you?
In this, the first time read will take a time. In write around cache, the first read operation will be having a time consuming. Second and third read will be faster.
Okay. So let's try to understand read both the approaches. Okay. All three we know what are the three approaches. So see, one benefit which you get will be writes will be faster in this case compared to write through cache, but will be slower than write back cache because here we are just writing it into the cache and not in the DB. DB is usually farther from the systems. So basically here we are writing it into DB. So we can say that here these are slower compared to write back cache, but faster compared to write through cache. So this works well with a read heavy system. I'll tell you why it will work well with a read heavy system, because see, when you're reading the data, you wrote the data into the database. Now you wrote, now you have to read the data. So basically for the first time, the data is not present. From the next time the data is present, right? So you will only put the data in the cache, which is actually read frequently. You are not putting all the data into the cache, which is the case in the write through cache. You're putting everything into the cache, which might or might not be relevant. Right? Here we are only putting the data which is actually read. And if it is read, that means there is a good chance that this will be read again. So that's why we are putting it into the cache, and that is the advantage which you get with the write around cache. Write is also not very slow. Read is also not very slow. For the first time, you have to read the data. There is one problem with this kind of algorithm. We'll talk about this in a while. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the problem. We'll talk about the solution later. The problem is that, let's say if you update, so let's say if you are reading the data, here you are writing the data. So let's say if you wrote the data of x equal to 100. Now you read that data here and put it in the cache x equal to 100. Now let's say the x became 110 here. X became 110 here. If you try to read the data again, because it is present in the cache, you'll end up returning x equal to 100 multiple times. So basically you're returning the stale data. You might end up returning the stale data in this particular case. We'll talk about the solutions for this as well. But is this clear to everyone? Did you understand what I'm trying to say here? Anyone who has any questions here? Please ask if you have any questions.
Can you please repeat the last one?
Sure, we'll do that. So what I'm saying is that here the data, what is happening? Let's try to draw the diagram again. So what is write around cache? In the write around cache, you are trying to write the data first into the database. In the write around cache, what you're doing is you're writing the data into the database first. And when you're reading the data for the first time, this data might not be present in the cache. Like this, sorry, this might not read, this is my cache. So what we'll do is we'll go and read the data from the database and put it into the cache, right? Put it into the cache. So let's say we are writing x equal to 100 for the first time. We'll put x equal to 100 in the database. We'll put x equal to 100 in the cache as well when we read it for the first time. Now let's say there was another read performed for x. So again, we'll return 100, 100, 100, 100. Now let's say let's say there is a write call, and this write updates the data of x equal to 100 to x equal to 110. Now, if you try to read the data, because the x equal to 100 is already present in the cache, you'll end up returning this x equal to 100 only. You'll end up returning the stale data in this case. Okay. We'll come on to the solution for this. So see, there is no data integrity issue. It depends if you're okay, if you can afford to have stale data in your system, then it's okay to actually go ahead and perform this. We'll talk about the solution. How can you actually avoid the stale data as well? We'll talk about this in a while. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes like most of the systems are designed in the way that it's okay to return the it's your data should be highly available. It's okay to return non-consistent data for some time. In that case, you can use this approach, and we'll try to see a workaround how to actually not return the stale data for a very long time. How can you completely avoid the stale data? We'll come on to the solutions of that as well. Okay, we'll talk about that in some time. Now there is something called write back cache. The problem with this approach is that say you have written the data into the cache. Now you have written a lot of data into the cache, and because of some reason you are unable to sync this data. It is taking some time to sync this data to the database. It could be possible that because you have eviction, right? You have only you can store 20% of the data. You have, let's say, 100 GB memory only, and database is very huge. So let's say if you have crossed a particular threshold after which you can't store, so you have to remove the data from the cache. Now it could be possible that some of the data which you have written into the cache is not synced with the database, and before you actually sync it with the database, it is already removed from the cache. So basically that will cause a problem, right? So in this case, there can be a data loss. So you need to be careful whenever you're performing the write back cache and make sure that there is no data loss. And if there is it's a critical data, then you should not perform the write back cache. So for example, if you have to increment some counters, decrement some counters, and 510 values of counters doesn't matter a lot. In those cases, you can use the write back cache. If you have some critical data, user related data, entities related data, system related data present in your system, you should never use the write back cache. And the third one is known as write through cache. What happens in this case is that the writes are very slow. Why the writes are slow? Because you have to write the data into the cache as well as into the database, right? And if one of them fails, then in that case, you can't consider that as a success. And you have to maintain that at an application level because you can't share the transaction between the cache and the database. Within the database, in multiple tables, you can have one single transaction to perform the operation, but you can't share the transaction between the cache and the DB. So you'll have to apply some logic at an application level to make sure that you don't end up writing the data. I mean, you don't end you either if you write the data, you write it in both cache as well as DB. Otherwise, you don't write it in any of those. And when you are reading the data here, when you read the data, you read it from the cache. It could be possible that you're reading the data which is not even relevant to, I mean, which is you're storing the data which is not even read multiple times. If it is not present in the cache, then you go and read the data from the data. This is known as write through cache. So writes are very slow in this case. Reads can be faster, but you might end up evicting the data which might be your relevant reads. So in most of the applications, what I've seen is you end up using the write around cache. But we have talked about a couple of problems with the write around cache, and let's try to see what are the solutions to those problems for the write around cache. We talked about two problems. So in the write around cache, you can have this stale data, and your reads are like the first read can be slow, but it's okay to have the first read as slow because we always want the data. I mean, we don't want to put everything into the cache. We only want to put the relevant data into our cache. Okay. Now, what is the problem we have to solve this stale data problem? So there are two ways. There are two ways to actually solve this stale data problem. So let's try to talk about this. How to fix stale data issue. So basically, one way to fix the stale data issue is have a time to live. What it means is that if you have set a time to live to 60 seconds or let's say 10 minutes, then automatically after 10 minutes, if you have stored the data at the time t0, at t0 plus 10 minutes, automatically this data will be marked as invalidated by the cache. So basically what cache will say is, I won't return the response if the time has been passed more than 10 minutes when I've wrote the data for the first time. In that case, the call will go to the database, the new value will be read from the database, the cache will be updated to the newest value, and the time t0 will be reset. Okay? And for the next 10 minutes, again, you might end up returning the stale data, but after 10 minutes, you won't return the stale data. So you can follow this approach whenever you have to, it's okay to, you can afford to have stale reads for few seconds, 2 minutes, correct? For few seconds, 2 minutes. Correct. You can afford to have this if you have stale reads for a few seconds, 2 minutes. Now, if this data, if so basically you can set it to 60 seconds as well. But if let's say if you can't afford to have any no stale reads, then in that case, what you do is we'll change this diagram. So we have a read here, we have a write here. Whenever you're writing the data, you'll write it into the DB. Whenever you're reading the data, you're reading from the cache, so it is not present in the cache. We read it from the DB and then put it into the cache. But now your writes won't be like this. The writes will change a bit. What you do is whenever you write the data, first you invalidate the cache. First you invalidate the cache for that particular key. Once you invalidate the cache for that particular key, then only you perform the write operations in the database. Now, because this key is invalidated, when you read the data for the first time, or when you read the data even if for the second time, and if the data is invalidated, you have to read the latest data from the cache, the database, put it into the cache and return that. So with the help of invalidation strategy in the write, while performing the write, you can actually avoid the stale reads. Now there is another problem with this in a multi-threaded environment. Let's try to understand this. This is a bit complex. If you'll focus, you'll be able to understand. Now see what can happen is, let's say there is some transaction T1, there is some transaction T2. Okay. Now what T1 is doing, T1 is trying to write the data into the cache. So T1 is doing some write performance in this for a key, some K1, key. Correct. Now first it will actually invalidate the cache. Now at the same time, invalidate cache at the same time. Once you have invalidated the cache, then it will try to write the data into the database. But before it has written the data into the database, T2 actually go, and because this was invalidated, so T2 actually go and try to read the data for key. And because this data was invalidated, it will go to the database and read the data from the database. So in a way, it is still reading the stale data only. So let's say K was 100. So K will be read was 100. It will update the cache to 100 again. And now after T1, now T1 has to perform write. So T1 will go and perform the write into the database. So T1 was changing it to 110. Although you have invalidated the cache, this data, because T2 started before, read the data before T1 wrote the data into this database, T2 end up, sorry, the cache end up, cache got updated with the stale data and will again started returning the stale data. And to be honest, I've implemented the cache on my own, and I've faced this issue in the real time. This can happen once in a while, but this was happening in our system. Now, the way we avoided this was when we invalidated the cache, we actually added a timestamp. And we say that for the next 60 seconds, we won't cache any data into our cache for the same key. Because we had a timeout of 60 seconds set on our write. So basically, if the data is not written successfully in 60 seconds, this will be rolled back automatically. This will become basically this write operation won't be successful. And within the 60 second, if there is any read performed, then we were always going and reading the data from the database. So we added a time of 60 seconds. Basically, once you've invalidated the cache, or I mean, it depends on the timeout of this, right? If it is 30 seconds, then you set this to 30 seconds and you say that I won't update my cache for those 30 seconds and I'll just read the data for those 30 seconds from the database, because this is storing my latest data always, consistent data, and I'll return that to my system. Is this clear to everyone? Any questions, any confusion, any doubts? Please ask if you have one.
Prakhar, I had one question. Why can't we invalidate the cache after writing to the DB?
Very good question. Why can't we invalidate the cache after writing to the DB? The problem with that is that here you're again, you can't afford. So one reason is basically in that meantime, if you try to, so there are two problems with that. So let's say you're performing the write operation, you have written the data into the database, and if you've written the data, in the meantime, if there is any read, you will actually end up returning the stale read. Let's say you can afford to have that stale read for a few seconds, like 3 or 4 seconds. If you try to invalidate this data now, and if this invalidation fails, correct? Because this is not performed in the same transaction, this transaction will be committed. Data is returned into the database. You are unable to invalidate the cache. There is no way to roll back this. But when we are writing the data, if the invalidation fails, correct, then we don't need to write it into the DB. If the DB write fails, then the write actually fails, right? So even if the data is not present in the cache, there is no stale data in our system, right? Because there was no successful write. So when we are reading the data next time, instead of reading it from the cache, we'll read it from the database, correct? But we don't end up doing any stale reads in those cases. But if you do it other way around, when you write it into the DB and then invalidate the cache, the possibility is that you have written it successfully into the DB. And when you're trying to invalidate the cache, if that fails, then you're not failing the transaction. Because you're not failing the transaction, you will have stale data present in your cache and some other data present in your data.
One question here. So we could have an async mechanism, right, to invalidate the cache after writing
There can
the
be an async mechanism. That's correct. But can you afford to do that is the question. If you
Makes
can
sense.
afford to
Makes
do
sense.
that,
Makes sense. How
then
much
it's yes,
time?
it's fine. It's fine. I mean, there is nothing. Then you can have a time to live as well, right? I'd give you another solution which is way more easier than performing the async flow. You say that I have 30 seconds of invalidation. So the problem is that you might want to keep the data for a longer time, so you might not end up using this. You can use that. You can do it in the async way, but this async process can keep failing for like minutes, hours, days. You don't know, right? Correct.
Makes
In
sense.
that meantime, you will end up returning the stale data. If you can afford to do that, it's perfectly fine. If you can't
Make.
afford to do that, then you can't perform that.
Prakhar,
Understood?
one more thing. Can you
Yeah,
just repeat the solution you guys implemented? I sort of lost on that, the 60-second one.
oh,
Just
okay.
1 minute.
Let me repeat the solution. So what I said is, first I'll always invalidate the cache. Okay. Once I'm invalidating the cache, then only I'll write it into the database. And what I'm saying is, whenever I'm invalidating the cache, I'll add a window of 60 seconds here. What I'm saying is, for this particular key, I won't cache the data for next 60 seconds. So even if there is any, see, if there is any write, if there is any read performed before this write, I am assuming that with this read will be a like we'll directly read the data and return to the database. We won't put it into the cache. And if there is any write, this write will be successful within 60 seconds, right? So after 60 seconds, we'll have the updated data present in our DB. So if the read is performed after that, then we'll put it into the cache. So for the 60 seconds, we are giving this write 60 seconds to successfully write the data into the database. If they are unable to write, then this will time out. Write will time out. So this write won't be successful. If they are successful, then we are not reading the data for those 60 seconds in our read. So we won't have any stale data present in our cache even by mistake.
So if I understood correctly, the cache will be invalidated only after 60 seconds. So it will be
Cache is invalidated right away, but cache won't store the data for the next 60 seconds, even if there is another transaction performing the read.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
Correct. It is invalid right away, but it won't store any data even if there is a read performed by some other transaction in the cache for the same key, because that might end up giving you the stale data, right? That might have read the stale data for you. This write was not yet performed.
Got
If
it.
it is
Got it.
performed, it will be performed within 60 seconds. So if the read is after that 60 seconds, then we'll cache it. If it is before that 60 seconds, then we don't need to put that into the cache. Correct. And we
Makes
are
sense.
saying that this will time out after 60 seconds. So if it times out after 60 seconds, then there is no update. So then we can read whatever we are reading, we can put it into the cache. Understood.
But for that 60 seconds, the reads will fail, right?
Reads won't fail. We'll go to the database and read the data from the database always. We just don't read the data from the cache in those cases. Why reads will fail? Reads are still successful, right? Database always contains the consistent data. Understood? Understood.
Okay.
So in this case, for the 30 seconds, there will be any huge operation on the database side
It's
because
not a
there are
huge
multiple
operation. See,
requests.
again, we should not say huge operation. So like let's say you have millions of rows, right? So there will be some, yeah. I mean you should say that not a huge operation. You should say that the latency of those calls will increase for 60 seconds.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
But we
might be the
can't
term is wrong. Mm.
yeah, but basically there are pros and cons, right? You can't design a system which is foolproof system. You can't do that. There are pros and cons. If you are okay to return the stale data, then you don't put this. If you are not okay to return the stale data, then you have to put this condition, and the latency will increase a bit.
Increase. Okay, okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? I know that there were so many questions on this part, and I was pretty. I mean, I was sure about that. There will be questions because this is a complex part. So this is about write around cache and different ways you should handle the write around cache. Write back cache and write through cache I've already talked about. Now we will talk about the eviction strategy. I'm not sure if you people can take more or not, but basically I'll talk about eviction strategies on a very high level today. And then we'll go into the details of the eviction strategies in the next session. And we'll try to design one cache, basically how actually a distributed cache is designed. We'll go into the details of that. We'll talk about the consistent hashing, how the caches are updated, how sharding and replications are performed in the consistent hashing. We'll talk about all those concepts in the next session. Let me quickly talk about all the eviction strategies. We'll write those algorithms, how the cache is stored, LRU cache and everything. We'll draw that in the next session. But on a very high level, I'll talk about the eviction strategies. What is eviction? Eviction means basically removing the data from the cache. Correct? See, as I told you that we can't store everything into our cache. There should be a way to remove the data. So right now we read the way to actually read the data from the cache or store the data into the cache. Now we are reading the strategies to remove the data from the cache. So now if you have to remove the data from the cache, we have to perform some eviction strategies. There are multiple eviction strategies. The first one is known as LRU, which is least recently used. So basically what we say is we'll remove the data from our cache, which is least recently used. The data which has been read least recently, that will be removed from my cache. The second one is LFU, which is least frequently used. The data which is least frequently used in and is present in our cache, and if you have to replace it with some other data, then the one which was least frequently used will be removed from our cache. The third one is opposite of this, which is MFU and MRU. So most recently used and most frequently used. MRU, so we'll remove the data which is most recently used. So there can be systems where you know that this data can be read once and only for once after we have put it into the cache. So in those cases, you can apply the MRU algorithm. This is very rarely, very, very rarely used. I haven't seen any system. I have personally not seen any system where most recently and most frequently eviction strategy is used. Basically, this is most frequently used. The data which has been read most frequently should be removed. then there is something known as first in, first out. The data which came into the cache first will be removed first from the next one can be uh, the next one can be a weighted algorithm, weighted mix, or we can say that customized algorithm, where you can actually take multiple parameters into consideration like MRU, MFU, and you can give the weights. Based on the weights, you can decide which data to remove or which data to present in the cache. The ones which are most frequent, I mean, these are the most commonly used one. And among this as well, like the LRU is the one which is most commonly used. Okay. LFU is also used, but it's not as commonly used as LRU. But compared to the other ones, these are the two algorithms which are used most commonly to actually affect the data from your cache. Now there are a couple of other terms. One is known as cache hit and the other one is known as cache miss. So cache hit means that when you're trying to read the data, if the data is present in your cache, that is known as cache hit. If the data is not present in your cache and you have to go to DB to read the data, that is known as cache miss. This is known as cache hit and cache miss. Time to live means that the data which will be stored in the cache will be not invalidated or will be returned as a response from the cache for that much time. Correct. So that is time to live, or after that automatically it will be marked as invalidated. This is time to. So these are all the concepts of cache. We have to go and read bunch of other concepts as well, but because the next concept will take like a little longer time, so we'll cover that in detail in the next session. We'll try to build some algorithm, write some algorithms around it. We'll see what data structure should you use it, how to handle that in the async and the sync flows as well. We'll talk about all those concepts as well. And then we'll try to design one cache with the help of consistent hashing. So we'll understand the whole concept of consistent hashing the next session. Anyone who has any questions here, I'm happy to take the questions. Otherwise, we'll end the call for today. Any questions, anyone? And did you learn anything out of this session or not? I mean, there were a bunch of concepts which I walked you through. So, I mean, if you enjoyed the session, you can actually, if you have any further questions and if you have any things else to ask, and yeah, next session is on Sunday at the same time. Documents and recording, I'm not sure if you can get this or not, but you can check with LearnBay and you should be able to get more information from LearnBay. I'm starting my personal batch as well sometime in October, mid of October, where we'll cover like bunch of concepts of high level design, low level design, basically how to attempt a question at Google. Personally, I've created a bunch of questions. We'll discuss those questions as well in detail. We'll explain all these concepts as a part of these sessions. Interested, you can get details from LearnBay. So basically, you might have registered yourself from some place, right? You might get the contact of the same from the LearnBay, and you can get more details about the session from the LearnBay. And if you want to register in our session for like a for high level design, complete high level and low level design course, and for the same you can actually contact them. I hope you enjoyed the session. And regarding the recording and